Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As a teacher, we definitely want our students to achieve the learning objectives that we have set at the beginning of the lessons. However, what if the learning outcomes obtained by our students are not in accordance with our learning objectives? Does it always mean negative? Instead, can we maximize it? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rusyda. I'm a master student of science education at Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. In this presentation video, I'm going to show you what unintended learning is, also how to identify and maximize it for the benefit of students' learning. Success in the learning process is often associated with the achievement of learning objectives determined by the teacher. In reality, each student brings different prior knowledge and experience, which lead them to perceive lessons differently. This results in different learning outcomes than those determined by the teacher. In this article, we refer to the term as unintended learning. Unintended learning is an inevitable issue which could appear in the learning process anytime. Hence, it is crucial for teachers to understand it. However, from previous study analysis, it was found that there's no article nor research which comprehensively focus on unintended learning available so far. So let me present you what I have been studied about unintended learning. The method used in this study is a literature review with 4 main steps. Firstly, articles related to the theme of unintended learning were explored. Exploration was limited to journals published from 2016 to 2020. Since the use of the keyword unintended learning proved difficult to screen relevant articles, similar terms were also used. Secondly, the selection was carried out to obtain 15 relevant articles. Thirdly, the important points of each article were analyzed and then be used to create an article's outline. Lastly, a detailed explanation was written based on the important points which have been obtained. For results and discussion, my talk will be in 4 parts, which are types, how to identify, factors affecting, and how to maximize unintended learning. In the first part, I will tell you about 3 types of unintended learning. First, formation of new knowledge. Learning outcomes other than those expected by teachers are almost associated with negative impacts in the form of misconceptions or alternative concepts perceived by students. Impacts of unintended learning cannot be completely underestimated because, in fact, several knowledge is actually beneficial for their future learning. It can be factual, conceptual, or even procedural knowledge. Second, the competency or skill that may arise during the science learning process are creative thinking and reasoning skills. How? Some science concepts will be easier for students to comprehend by performing practical activities. Before doing so, teachers may organize a discussion by providing a perception questions to enhance creative thinking and students' reasoning skills. Attitude and emotions. In biology, it is necessary for students to make direct contact with the environment and living creatures, especially animals. Unfortunately, not all students have the same interest in animals. Science learning is expected to change these negative emotions and perceptions because this will be related to the attitude of caring and conserving the environment in students, especially if the animals they don't like are rare or endangered. The previous study implies that one of the methods teachers and schools may apply is by making direct visits to conservations for animal groups which students tend to dislike and be afraid of. By doing so, students will be more motivated to learn and find out things they've discovered and imagine about various kinds of animals before. Number 2, how to identify unintended learning. Teachers can utilize and maximize unintended learning only if they can detect and identify them. So how? Unintended learning can be identified through multiple methods. The main identification method is by repeating recorded learning activities in the form of audio recordings or videos. This will be highly useful for teachers to review students' conversation or action, which may not be observed while the learning activity is in progress. If it's not feasible to record the activities due to the concern of natural distractions, teacher may perform reflection at the end of the lesson or write personal notes during learning activity. The data from recordings can be completed and cross-checked with direct answers from students themselves in so many ways, such as interviews, worksheet, questionnaires, or memo. In reality, sometimes teachers are unable to detect the existence of unintended learning during the lesson. This might happen especially when students work in groups. However, a study indicates that teachers occasionally are able to detect unintended learning, but ignore it and do not provide immediate feedback. Due to high curriculum demands and limited time allocation, teachers were forced to prioritize the achievement of learning objectives. However, teachers may solve this by creating notes of observed unintended learning, evaluating them, then discussing them in the next meeting with the students. All right, let's turn to the third part. Unintended learning may occur due to the influence of various factors. Broadly speaking, these various factors can be classified into two types, which are internal and external factors. Internal factor can be defined as the factor which comes from the internal condition of students, while external factor comes from the outside. In reality, the occurrence of unintended learning is influenced by a combination of these two types of factors. In terms of internal factors, unintended learning will only occur if students are interested and curious regarding to the discussed topic and eager to find out more about it. Students' prior knowledge and experience also have a big impact. For students fascinated by previous learning experience, it will be easier for them to have unintended learning. Yet, there are times when students ignore their curiosity when finding something new or interesting. It could happen not only because they lack of passion, but there's cultural norm that make them do so. To give an example is a study in elementary school in South Korea. Most students there always think that asking a question that is irrelevant to the intended lesson is not appropriate, and this is the prevailing cultural norm amongst Korean students. Teachers also play important role as an external factor regarding the way they choose pedagogic strategy and create the proper learning environment and atmosphere. A good learning environment will provide a psychological safety to students to ask questions, express opinions, reflect and receive feedback from the teacher, and so on. Finally, I'll go on to talk about how maximize unintended learning. One of the methods which play a role in utilizing unintended learning is by facilitating students' feedback. This dynamic interaction between teachers and students is very useful in improving learning outcomes. It can be performed either written or oral. The form of the feedback given may vary, for example, by discussing directly with students outside the classroom, discussing it with the class, providing additional learning resources for students, and so on. I would like to conclude my presentation by emphasizing 4 main points. First, unintended learning is an inevitable issue which appears in the learning process, particularly science learning, in the form of several types, including forming new knowledge, improving certain learning competencies and skills, and enhancing learning attitude toward the science material. Second, unintended learning is affected by internal and external factors. Third, science teachers have an important role in identifying unintended learning which occurs to their students during the science learning process. And the last one, the identification result can be used by the teacher to determine the next steps, such as providing feedback, which is appropriate to maximize the unintended learning of the students. And this brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you for taking time out to listen to my presentation. I fully appreciate it. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.